Jonah, I want to lift my arms and have a party too. Hey, everybody, welcome to Wildlife 101. If you are jumping on the chat, go ahead and let us know where you're tuning in from. And by where you're from, I mean what town, what county, your kitchen, your living room, maybe annex if you're having to use the bathroom. But let us know where you are.
Well, I'm already seeing some names of folks that have been to programs at Mason Mill Park and probably already heard me talk about beavers.
Must have
Can't
been
get
good if they
enough.
came back.
Hey, so if you're logging in and you want to let us know where you're tuning in from, we'd love to see that. Otherwise, we're going to give people a couple moments to log on and then we're going to get started. All right, I see Norcross, Georgia, Milton, from Atlanta, DeKalb County, Brookline. Hi all. Thanks, Sandra. Tammy, we're across the hall from each other.
And it looks like some people are sending their chats to just the host and panelists. So if y'all want everybody to see it, make sure everybody is everyone is who it's going to.
Yeah, there's a little drop down.
And I'll say, "Hi, Mom."
I also love that somebody's donating blood and they're tuning in. So
Very impressive.
yeah,
Priorities.
that's right. We got a Marietta, Decatur, a couple Decaturs. Super fun. We're gonna get the show started in about a minute.
Well, we were hoping this would be a good partnership between the city of Milton and DeKalb County, and it looks like we got a lot of folks from DeKalb and a lot of folks from North Metro. So it's exactly what we were hoping for. Glad everyone's here.
All right, folks, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. And if people are rolling in, you'll jump on board where we're at. My name is Jen Young and I work for the city of Milton. And I'm super excited to have you here today. This is our fourth Wildlife 101 series, but it's actually the third webinar in the series. So the first one was in person and we decided to take it online. And really this program started because I had wonderful residents here in Milton reaching out to me and they wanted to know about the wildlife they were finding in their backyard. So I would get a lot of calls about coyotes and beavers, which you're all here for today. And then I would also get calls about everyday wildlife. They would see blue herons in our ponds. They would see deer. Our parks are filled with deer. They're filled with wildlife. And so we're super excited to have you all on today, and we're going to learn a little bit more. So I sit here at the city of Milton, which is in North Fulton County, which has a vast, wide green space. We have over 13 parks, and most of those are actually just left as wild wilderness. And so it's my job here in the city of Milton to help the residents engage with their native properties, that are left to be the wild lands, and then also to preserve those lands. So a couple of the programs that I offer, one you're in today, and that's the Wildlife 101 webinar. And this is intended to educate you, but also for you to give us feedback and what you want to learn more about. I run a junior ranger program, much like Ranger Jonah in DeKalb County. So it's intended to educate our youth, empower them, and help them engage better with their wildlife, just like you are. We run backpacking programs or backcountry programs, and then I also run a Learn to Fish program. You can find all of that on our website. We'd love to have you engage. A lot of these programs are free of charge. Some have a very nominal fee. Next month, just to queue up next month, if you're interested in learning about amphibians, particularly frogs, we're gonna have the wonderful Linda May on. She's from Georgia DNR and she is just incredible. She comes highly recommended. If you want to learn about frogs and amphibians or you have questions for her, that's gonna be next month on May 13th from 6 p.m. to 7:30. All right, to help everybody stay focused on the topic and what we're doing today, you are being recorded, and that is so we can have this lasting for a lifetime. So it's going to go on our website, just like you found this one. If you found it on the City of Milton website, which we have located multiple places on here, you can find next month's and the ones coming. If you have questions throughout this, which I hope you do for Ranger Jonah, we ask that you use the Q&A box. That will log the questions, and as he answers them, you'll see them go in the answered box. If you ask questions in the chat, sometimes they get a little lost, so we're asking for you to share your celebrations in the chat. If you want to just share fun feedback, you can. Otherwise, ask your questions in the Q&A box and we will answer them. Jonah's going to do his best to try to answer some questions throughout the presentation, but he has a really interactive couple of videos, and he would like to save most of the questions for the end, but where we can, we're going to plug your questions in. So as you think of them, don't hold them. Go ahead and put them in the chat. They will get answered. And then at the end of this presentation, you'll have an opportunity to give feedback. And it's quick, it's a couple questions. And mainly we're trying to drive, are you still curious in this topic and would like more? Do you have other ideas for topics that you would like for us to do? And giving kudos to Jonah because we know he's a great presenter. And then on to the main event, the one, the only, Jonah McDonald, or affectionately known as Ranger Jonah for DeKalb County. I'm going to let him tell you more about himself because he's really the storyteller that I tell everybody that he is. But a couple things that are notable to me beyond being a storyteller and being a park ranger and a naturalist, of which he very much cares about his park in Mason Mill. And if you're on here and you've been to Mason Mill, then you already know who this guy is. For those of you that are in Milton or in other cities and you haven't had a chance to meet Jonah, I highly recommend that you jump on board with one of his programs because you're going to be in awe. But he's a published author. I know that he's a storyteller, that he's going to tell you the stories today. And my favorite part about Jonah is he's really an explorer. He's a curious guy. He stays curious. And I think that's what makes a great park naturalist, is he never stops being curious. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jonah.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to get to visit with you all today. I have some slides to kind of illustrate so you don't have to look at this mug the whole time. So I'm going to turn that on, and then we're going to get talking about beavers, y'all. All right. And you should be able to see it now, yes?
2 thumbs up.
All right, very good, very good. Well, I must say that I love the title of this presentation. Would you believe it? Everything you want to know about beavers. And I have to also say that if you know me, you know I love a good dad joke. And Ranger Jen actually came up with this title, not me. So good kudos for adding a little dad joke into our presentation. The problem with this presentation, though, is I'm going to be really upbeat and very excited about beavers pretty much the whole time because that's who I am. But I'm going to start us out on a downer note. I'm going to start you out by talking about some problems that I've found in our ecosystem because I think this kind of tees up why we want to talk about beavers today. So here's some problems, and you can make the kind of wah wah sound on your end. Oh man, yeah, you see that English ivy? These introduced species from other places that have grown overabundant in monocultures, like those trees being completely smothered by common ivy. Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, that's a creek that has been concreted in. It's a big loss of wildlife habitat. You know, large farms are really important, but it also is a reduction in biodiversity when we use our land for just one purpose. Of course, we know about some of the really horrible flooding that's happened. But on the flip side of the flooding that we see, we oftentimes have drought. So we're talking about a lot of problems here, but imagine one creature that could possibly alleviate all of these issues. Oh yes, I'm a beaver believer, y'all. And I hope by the end of the presentation, you all might consider yourself beaver believers as well. And all right, so I feel like this statement, one creature that can alleviate all of these issues, might be a little bit of an overstatement, but I think what we can do is we can look at this as one piece of the puzzle of solving our ecological problems. So there is a small colony of beavers that lives at the park that I work at, which is Mason Mill Park in DeKalb County. It's a 100-acre forest, and there's an area of forest that is a wetland. The only reason it's a wetland is because there is a colony or a family of beavers that has created 5 tiers of dams that hold in the rainwater. They actually haven't dammed the creek itself to an extent that the creek's overflowed its banks, but they've created this really thriving wetland. And if you look at the biodiversity in our park, it's exactly where those beavers are. So tonight, I'm going to just share my passion with you a little bit, but I'm also going to try to teach you some history, some ecology, even some hydrology, some engineering, and but before we get into that, why beavers? Why beavers? Well, I'll tell you 3 of my top reasons for loving beavers. But as you'll see below each of these reasons, my reasons to like them might be a reason some people dislike them. Beavers create new habitat. But have you ever heard somebody say, beavers are cutting down my trees, my backyard's flooded? That's true. Beavers do build habitat because they want to live in an aquatic environment, but we humans don't necessarily want that. I think beavers are super cute with those little paws and little nose and teeth and that flat tail. But I can also imagine people saying, beavers are weird. And beavers are gross. There's some pretty gross facts about these rodents. And that's one of the reasons I love them. But I can imagine you also might say, yeah, beavers are gross, not my cup of tea. So stick with me here. And as you see, this short little list tells you a little bit about me. You know, I'm a naturalist. I am also a nerd. I'm kind of sometimes like a preteen boy as well, at least at heart. But here's a little bit more about me. I thru-hiked the whole Appalachian Trail, which means I hiked from Mount Katahdin in Maine all the way to my new home in Georgia. So I can almost literally say I walked to my new home. That was over 20 years ago now. Today I am the DeKalb County Park Naturalist at Mason Mill Park. In my personal life, I've written, well, I guess it's 4 books, but a hiking guidebook and a book called Secret Atlanta, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure. And I'm excited that the newest book, which is coming out in a month, called Hiking Metro Atlanta's Hidden Forests, includes multiple parks right here in Milton, also some in DeKalb County. Let's see, what else? I'm one of the co-founders of the Georgia Beloved Naturalist Program, which is a naturalist training program that I just really, really believe in. I'm also on the national leadership team for an organization called Just Language in Ecology Education. I'm a professional storyteller. Mostly that means telling folk tales to children, but lots of different kinds of storytelling. I'm a father. I have a 10-year-old daughter. And I also have a whole lot of tattoos on my arms and my chest as well. And one of these tattoos is actually of a beaver. And I posted this on social media the other day, and somebody said, wow, you're doing a webinar and you went and got a tattoo to commemorate it? Yes, I did. So that's a little bit about who I am. But let me give you an outline of our beaver journey tonight. I'm going to talk to you about the history of beavers in North America. We're going to talk about the anatomy, life cycle, and behavior of beavers. We're going to talk about how beavers change the ecosystem. And we're also going to talk about human beaver coexistence. Because what I like to say is that there are really only two creatures that dramatically change their environment: beavers and humans. And as a result, there's oftentimes conflict between what beavers want and what humans want. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we might coexist. Alrighty, let's get into the history of beavers in North America. So, did y'all know that there used to be, back 15,000 years ago in the Pleistocene area here in North America, giant beavers? That is a big rodent, isn't it? I'm very glad they're not around. That might be a little frightening to me. Today, beavers are much smaller. 30 kilograms, that roughly is 50 pounds. That's a full-grown beaver. There are actually two worldwide species of beavers. There's the American beaver, Castor canadensis. That's what we're going to be talking about. And there's also the Eurasian beaver, which lives in, used to live all throughout Europe, is just being reintroduced to some areas of Europe and through Eurasia. We won't be talking about that as much. And when it says least concern, that means at this point, we are not concerned about the survival of either of these species of beavers. So before 1492, when European colonizers arrived, there's a wide variety of estimates about how many beavers used to be in North America. I think the most common estimate is somewhere in the 50 to 100 million beaver range. That's a lot of beavers, y'all. And some estimated up to 400 million of these animals just in North America. What we're talking about is a North America that in many places was a water world. It was a world in which creeks did not just flow within their boundaries like they do today, but rather creeks flowed through wetland areas dammed by millions and millions of these large rodents. Let's see, where am I here? Today, the current estimate in North America is only between 6 and 12 million beavers. There's been a dramatic reduction in the number of beavers. They do live just about everywhere in North America. You can see that pink area on the map. And it's really just like the desert that they don't live in, some of the lower Florida, and the very North Arctic. Beavers have even been found in the brackish water of coastal wetlands. So beavers they can pretty much live pretty much anywhere they want to live. So why was there this dramatic reduction? And many of you probably know this already, but it was hats. And Europeans found these beavers. They thought, wow, those are slow, plodding creatures, and they really don't mind swimming into traps if you bait them with their most delicious food. So we are going to trap them and kill them and skin them, and we're going to make hats out of beavers. Now, this is what I always imagined a beaver hat to look like. Either like a Davy Crockett hat, but instead of a raccoon tail having a beaver tail, or just like a big furry hat. But that's actually not the kind of hat. It was a hat more like the one I'm wearing. This kind of hat is what beaver pelts were used for. And the reason for that is that the inner fur of a beaver is almost designed like Velcro. And the way you make felt is by you layer fibers on top of each other and then kind of steam it. And those fibers kind of join together into that felt material. And beaver fur was perfect for felting. And so to make a felt hat, beaver fur was really easy to make felt of. But then second, beaver fur, because they're aquatic rodents, is very waterproof, water repellent. And so as a result, an easy to make felt hat that had water repellent qualities was perfect. And you see all of these folks from this era and all these different kind of hats being made out of beaver pelts. And so beavers were hunted and trapped and trapped. And there is a word that you've probably heard the word well, now I've forgotten the word, extinct. You've heard the term extinction. That's when a species is completely wiped out. But beavers were extirpated. That means wiped out from a certain area. So they were not forced to go extinct, but they were extirpated. And in fact, the state of Connecticut by the mid 1800s had 0 beavers living in the state of Connecticut. Now, beavers have been reintroduced in Connecticut, and now there are beavers living there again. But that wasn't until 1914 when some ecologists decided that beavers should be living in Connecticut. That's what the environment needs, and started reintroducing beavers to that area. So these little cuties are hard at work here, building a dam. And we're going to talk some about their anatomy, their life cycle, and their behavior. All right. Hopefully there's no more downers from here on out. Because talking about near extinction of a creature is pretty sad. So what is the size and weight of a beaver? We've already mentioned that around 50 pounds, that's kind of the size of them. The typical beavers can be 35 to about 70 pounds, and they're usually about 4 feet long, nose to tail. And here's a beaver that is at Mason Mill Park. Do you see its back feet are webbed, but its front feet have claws? And there's that flat tail that makes everybody know that that's a beaver. I want to show you a little bit about beaver anatomy. And in order to do that, I'm actually going to take us off share, and I'm going to show you a beaver skull that that's found here in DeKalb County. So you can see me now. And now I'm also going to take off the blur background feature, and then we're going to reach over and we're going to show you a beaver's skull. So this is the nasal cavity. Beavers are really, really good at smelling. They are not nearly as good at seeing. This is their eye cavity, and you see how wide set their eyes are. And that's because they're a prey animal. So they want to be able to see as far around as they can, but their vision is really not what does it for them. It's really their sense of smell. But the thing that beavers are really known for is these teeth. Can you see how orange those teeth are? Well, there's a lot of amazing things about beaver teeth. The first of all is the reason they're orange is because they're enamel. Now that's the hard part of their teeth. We have enamel that goes all the way around our teeth, and it is the hardest substance in the human body. This is also a very, very hard substance, but the way beavers' teeth are built is they actually have iron molecules in their enamel. And when the iron oxidizes, it makes their teeth this orange color. The other thing that's unusual about beavers is, compared to us, is that their teeth do not have enamel on the backside. So if we look at the backside of their teeth, this is just dentine. And the dentine is the part inside our teeth. It's softer than the enamel. So what ends up happening is because there's only enamel on the outside of the teeth and then dentine on the inside, as beavers chew on wood, the dentine gets filed down more quickly than the enamel, making their teeth chisel shaped, which works really well for them. The other thing that's kind of crazy about these, and you may know this if you know anything about rodents, is that beavers, like other rodents, have teeth that never stop growing. If I was to cut this skull in half, we would find that their teeth start growing all the way back here and then finally come out right here. And they're just never ending growing. So beavers are kind of compelled to chew because if they weren't wearing their teeth down, their teeth would just continue growing and growing and growing, and they couldn't feed themselves. So I actually have a beaver tooth to show you right here. So this right here is a beaver's tooth, and you can kind of see how it would curve down through their skull in this really, really long fashion. There's the very tip of it, so that's the part. All of the enamel has iron, but look at the part that was in this beaver's skull has not yet oxidized, whereas this part right here, which sticks out of their mouth, has. And it also has that chisel shape that we were talking about. So we could go on talking about beaver teeth and what do these beaver teeth tell us about how beavers behave. But I want to first tell you just a little bit about their tail, their toes, and I've also mentioned their fur a little bit. So first of all, their tail, which is that long, flat surface, it can be used for multiple things. One is they use it to prop themselves up. They're oftentimes on their hind legs, either when they're chewing on a tree or when they're carrying mud in their front paws and waddling across the land to put it on their dams. So it can be used as a prop. It's used as a rudder while they swim. It can also be used to signal alarm. They'll slap their tail on the water. You'll hear a loud slapping sound. And it's also a fat reserve for during the lean winter months. So that beaver tail is where they store their fat to get through the winter. And finally, their tail also serves as a heat exchange organ, and it reduces the loss of body heat in very cold places. So their tail is a really cool thing too. I do not have a beaver tail to show you. The other thing about their claws is their front claws have split nails on two of their toes, and those split nails act as a comb. So when you see a beaver kind of running its paws through its fur, it's both waterproofing its fur, but it's also combing its fur using those little split toenails, which I think is super, super cool. And then finally, talking about that hair, you may know that, that river otters have the most hairs per centimeter of any North American mammal. But beavers are very, very close to that. Beavers have between 12,000 and 23,000 hairs per centimeter of skin. That's a lot of hair. And otters, though, you can't really even compare any other animal with an otter. Otters can have up to 50,000 hairs in 1 centimeter. So that is very thick hair, and that's also a reminder of why Europeans like to make hats out of beaver fur. Okay, so that's a little bit about anatomy of the beavers. Let me go back to my slideshow and show you a few more pictures now. Okay. And it's still black. There we go. So if you were to see a beaver in the wild, you would not necessarily know that if this beaver is a male beaver or a female beaver. An animal that the males and the females look different is called being sexually dimorphic. But beavers are not sexually dimorphic. In fact, their sex organs are internal. And a female's mammary glands, they are mammals, they're only visible for a very short time when their babies are nursing. So how do people tell the difference between beavers? Well, here's your first gross beaver fact of the day, you have to check the color and consistency and smell of their anal gland secretions. Or you can palpate their penile bone. Okay, I don't want to do either of those things, but if you are a scientist and trying to make sure that you have in front of you a female beaver or a male beaver, it is very hard to tell the difference. What I've read and heard, though, is that most people who work with beavers regularly just say the males have a smell about them. Well, that's not the way I want to find out what the sex of an animal is either. So these little tiny critters are baby beavers, and like any baby animal, they are incredibly cute. Look at those little feet. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. But you know, just about any baby animal is super cute. But beavers have about one litter every year. They gestate for 100 days, and they usually have 2 to 4 kits, which are what the babies are called. They can have up to 9 of them, which would be a lot for a mother beaver. They're born in the late spring. I'm really excited to find out if the beavers at Mason Mill Park may have babies this year. And these babies, when they're born, they're fully mobile. They already have their fur, and they weigh about 1 pound. By 4 days old, they can swim. but their fur is not yet waterproof. They have to spread oil secretions on their fur in order to make their fur fully water repellent, and that's after about 5 weeks or so. The typical colony of beavers, which is what we call their group, but it's really a family of beavers. The adults mate for life, so you have a male and a female, that's the mating pair. They usually have yearlings who stay with them for the first 2 years of their life, sometimes 3, but usually 2 years. And then there's usually some babies or kits as well. So the family group all works together to kind of maintain the wetland, which means digging the canals and building the dams. I feel like I had a video that I've missed, but maybe it's still coming up. I was really wanting to show you, but we're gonna, before we get into that, we're gonna talk about a couple myths about how beavers behave. So first of all, you know what this is. This is a beaver dam, but not all beavers actually build dams. Some beavers live in an environment that's already perfect for beavers. Let's just say a lake that's maintained by humans. And beavers can live in that lake and just don't build dams. There's just no reason for them to do it. I was always pretty surprised by that. But the thing that beavers do instead is that they will dig canals. So in the wetlands at Mason Mill Park, the water is fairly shallow in a lot of places. But all the way through the wetlands, there are these areas you got to really watch out if you're walking through the wetlands in waders, because the beavers have dug these deep canals for them to swim through, because they're much faster swimming than they are walking. So not all beavers build dams, but most of them do dig canals. Myth: all beavers live in creeks. Well, I think that that's what we usually think of, is a beaver damming a creek. But as we've already mentioned, beavers can live in many, many ecosystems, but what they want is water. So pretty much any aquatic ecosystem is where beavers can live. All right, this is pretty iconic right here. You know what this is called. This is a beaver lodge. But that's a myth that all beavers build lodges. In fact, at Mason Mill Park, we don't even have a lodge at Mason Mill Park. And I know for certain that we have beavers that live there because we've seen them on our wildlife cameras and I've seen them personally. Why do beavers not all build lodges? Well, the lodge is to provide access under the ice for beavers that live in cold climates. And so, for instance, if you were a beaver and you were preparing for a very cold winter, you would be collecting lots and lots of sticks. But instead of eating the inner bark from underneath sticks, from the sticks, you would just cache those sticks under water right near your dam, or right near your lodge. And then you could live in that warm, dry lodge throughout the winter and then swim under the ice to go get food from your food cache. In places without ice, some beavers still make lodges. Most beavers don't cache food, though. For instance, here in Atlanta, they have food that they can eat pretty much all year round. And so beavers don't usually create food caches like they do up north, and they don't always create lodges either, but some do. At Mason Mill Park, our beavers live in bank burrows, which means pretty much a hole that they've dug into the side of the creek bank, the wetland bank, or the side of their dam. And the entrance is submerged because beavers are fastest underwater, so the entrance is always underwater. And then finally, we have this myth that beavers eat meat. Beavers do not. They are herbivores or vegetarians. And I just think this is a fantastically cute video of a beaver eating. Or you might say, that's a weird video of a beaver eating, and you'd also be right. What do beavers primarily eat? They eat herbaceous plants. That means plants that have like soft greenery, right? They eat leaves, they eat twigs, and they love eating the inner bark of trees. And they even have favorite trees. Beavers love eating the inner bark of willow trees and of poplar trees. Oh, that beaver's almost out of all of its cabbage. I'll stop him there. And that's one of the things that we find when a beaver moves into an area is that they first eat the food that they like the best. Well, I guess that's kind of how we humans oftentimes do too. And then they will move on to the food that they don't like as much. One of the things that's super interesting about willows to me, we know that they're the beaver's preferred food, but the way willows have also evolved is, if you know anything about gardening, you can snip a branch off of a willow tree and then put that branch into water or just stick it down in wet soil, and that branch will grow a root. And that's kind of an example of, well, willows and beavers co-evolved. And so beavers chop them down and willow trees just grow right back up. And so in a beaver area, instead of a willow tree being a tall, stately tree, a willow tree will be much more like a shrub with lots of kind of coppicing branches coming out of its base because beavers keep on chewing them and eating them. But I love how when there's areas in which organisms have co-evolved, you'll oftentimes find those kind of neat evolutionary quirks. Okay. Okay, beaver, we're not going to watch you eating again. There we go. So here's the other video I wanted to show you. This is a story about the first beaver I ever saw.
Y'all know my favorite animal is Castor canadensis, the North American beaver, right? Well, I want to tell you the story of the first time I ever saw a beaver. Now, this is a rescue beaver in captivity, but she behaves really similarly to the first one I ever saw in the wild. It was dusk in the wetlands, and I heard a small splash, and there she was. This is a really big rodent. She sat back on her haunches and then reached down and began rubbing her belly, kind of like what this one is doing right now. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, this must be a pregnant beaver, because I've oftentimes seen pregnant humans rubbing their bellies. So I Googled, do pregnant beavers rub their bellies? And found out something way different and super gross. The beaver was actually putting her fingers into her anal oil gland and rubbing that anal oil all over her fur to waterproof it. Ew, right?
You didn't know you'd be getting into that when you saw this beaver webinar, did you? But I promise I will save the absolute grossest beaver fact till the very, very end of the webinar. So stick to the bitter end if you're interested in that, or when I tell you at the very, very end, now I'll tell you the gross fact, then you can click it off. So beavers do have these anal glands that they use to waterproof their fur, but they also have another gland kind of in that same area called the castor sac. And what the castor sac is really a scent kind of gland. So if you think about a skunk spraying their scent to kind of ward off predators, beavers use the castoreum in their castor sacs. That's kind of the, well, it's kind of like a paste, a strong smelling brown paste to mark their territories. And I remember I mentioned to you that beavers are very smell driven. It has been proven by scientists that the castoreum deposited around a beaver colony can tell beavers, is the beaver that just stopped by a family member, a known neighbor, or a completely unknown neighbor. They're that good at being able to pick out the differences between the castoreum smell. Castoreum is also prized by humans, and beavers' castor sacs are, when a beaver is trapped, or the castor sac is oftentimes sold for use in perfumes and colognes. But it is a strong smell, and some people say that it has a scent like a little like vanilla. I have not sniffed a beaver's castor gland before, so I cannot tell you that for certain. So I guess there's a beaver gross fact number 2. That's not even the grossest one yet, y'all. All right. So,
Y'all know my favorite
well, we're not going to get that. Let's see. There we go. So now we're going to talk about how beavers change the ecosystem. Obviously, this picture I chose because the most obvious way beavers change the ecosystem is a lot of chewing. But the real thing that I think is really important about beavers is how they change our aquatic ecosystems, in particular our creeks. So at Mesa Mill Park, which is an urban creek in the heart of DeKalb County, and probably at many of the parks, even in Milton, and throughout the Atlanta metro area, there is so much impervious surface. That means surface that water cannot soak into. I'm talking roofs of houses, parking lots, roads, etc. All that impervious surface, the water just flows right off and goes straight into our creeks. And as a result, this torrent of water comes down our creeks every time it rains. And what that does is it incisors the banks. It makes the banks super steep. If you were at a healthy stream that has the appropriate amount of surface around it that water can seep into, you'll have a bank that kind of is a soft flow down to where the stream is. But most of the streams that we're going to see at our parks in the metro area are going to look a little like this. So this is South Fork Peachtree Creek, which runs right through my park. And you can see these kids are standing in what, about 2 feet of water. And so these banks are probably 8 feet tall. And you see how eroded they are and also how steep they are. And that is unnatural. That's not the way a creek should look. And so even for animals, this creates a problem, because if you're a critter and you want to move from the dry land down into the creek, or you want to move from a wetland into a creek, you have to go down this super steep embankment. And so as a result, beavers have engineered a way into the creek. This is one of our beaver slides at Mason Mill Park. And what they've done is hollow out this kind of like pie-shaped divot in the creek bank to, instead of having to like topple in that 8 feet straight upright bank, they can kind of like crawl down to get to the water. And because the beavers have built this, all the other animals use it. So I've put a wildlife camera, which I'm going to show you some videos of soon. I put a wildlife camera right at the entrance to this beaver slide, and we get to see all this wide diversity of animals. So it's not just when it's not just beavers trying to figure out how to get in and out of our creeks, but beavers also change the creeks. So if you have a creek that's very incised, remember that's the like very steep banks and the very low flow of the water. We have a few diagrams here. An incised creek that beavers put a dam across. That dam is going to block the water, and it's going to cause a lot of erosion on either side. So if you have a forest that runs right up to the bank of an incised creek, that forest is going to end up having a lot of erosion, and a lot of those trees are going to come down. And you can imagine that being really disruptive, because our idea is that our forest is supposed to come right up to the edge of our creek, and then the creek banks are supposed to be super incised. So you see this first step, once beavers move in, is a lot of damage. But then beavers build dams across that whole channel. And very, very quickly, a lot of sediment builds up behind the dams. And all of a sudden, the level of the creek bed begins to rise. And as that happens, lots of vegetation that wants to grow near the water. So not like a hardwood forest that really wants to have dry soil, but a lot of these plants that love having their toes in the water, likes having their roots very close to water, start growing. And guess what? Animals love to eat those plants. Beavers. And so beavers eat those plants, and you get this ecosystem building. And then finally, it becomes more and more complex. And you have this number, the last one here on the right, in which you have this slow moving creek that's still flowing downstream, but across beaver dams and through wetlands. And it has created such a diverse habitat that it draws a huge amount of not just vegetation, but also animal life. And what all that animal life is based upon is aquatic invertebrates. If you are a dragonfly larva, you do not want a incised creek, because the water flows so fast down there, you're going to be washed away. What you want is slow flowing with lots of leaf litter and debris in the water that you can hide underneath. And as a result of beavers, you've created this diverse environment where all of these aquatic invertebrates live. And guess what eats those? It's the amphibians, it's the fish, it's even the birds. And then what ends up eating those? And then you start getting the mammals coming in, and you end up having all of the layers and links in the food chain that we think about because beavers have created this habitat, really honestly, just selfishly for them. They're slow out of water, they want to live in water. And they also want plants that they want to eat, and those plants tend to grow around water. So for this reason, because beavers create this brand new ecosystem that holds a huge amount of diversity, we call beavers keystone species. So they are doing just what's best for themselves, but by doing that, they have created a habitat for a huge amount of more organisms. So one of the things that I've been doing at Mason Mill is I've been trying to kind of catalog all the different species, all this biodiversity that lives in these wetlands. So I took a camera and put it on one of the beaver canals. And for about a month and a half, I collected videos of all the different animals that showed up, and I edited them together to show you what this biodiversity looks like. And so we're going to play this video right now, and I won't need to do any talking because, well, I'm going to be talking in the video, and you'll get to see just how cool of a wildlife habitat these beaver-built wetlands are.
Hey y'all, this is Ranger Jonah, and I'm standing in one of the most iconic spots here at Mason Mill Park, our wetlands. But over here, on the other side of the boardwalk, there's a small canal that I found is thriving with animal life. So let's look at them together and see what we see. This creature right here, this is actually a muskrat, which is a large aquatic rodent. Looks a lot like a beaver, but when it moves, you can see it has a tail that's long and skinny. In the daytime, waterfowl are active. Those are Canada geese in the foreground, and in the background, I think mallard ducks. Another kind of duck that frequents Mason Mill Park are wood ducks. The male, the more brightly colored one, on the right now, and then the female on the left. And we have lots of rabbits that live here at Mason Mill Park as well, both swamp rabbits and eastern cottontail rabbits. And did you know that rabbits can swim? What animal is this? It's eating something. It looks like a river otter to me. Oh, yep, those are river otters. And that is a raccoon. They're called procyonids. That's their animal family name. And it means washes their food. And you can see how it uses its little front paws to search for food. And it almost looks like it's washing it. There it swims away. Back to the otters. This is an otter family. The two on the right are juveniles, and the one that just swam away is their mom. Off they go. Oh, y'all, this is a yellow-crowned night heron. Called a night heron because they oftentimes hunt at night. And look, it's eating something. You will see them in the daytime as well. But it's pretty special to get to have the night vision camera here. That is a rat. Not a muskrat, but I think a wood rat. Oh, and that's a mink. A juvenile raccoon. Found something to eat, maybe a crayfish. And here's our Canada goose. Oh, and another one. Oh, and the babies. Well, they're not really babies anymore, maybe teenagers. I think they're still cute. So why is this canal here, and why is it frequented by so many creatures? Well, we can start by knowing who built it. These creatures right here. These are North American beavers, and we have a colony of beavers, which are aquatic rodents that live at Mason Mill Park. Because they're so much better at swimming and moving around in the water, beavers not only build dams, but they also build canals that allow them to navigate the fairly shallow waters of our wetlands. Beavers can get up to 50 pounds sometimes, though these are not as large as some beavers I've seen. And all of the material that you see on the right side of your screen, all of that was placed there this winter and spring by beavers. You can see one carrying a branch right now. Much of the material is privet, which is one of the plants that have been introduced to the environment and grow in a monoculture. Even though privet is an introduced plant, you can see that the beavers still enjoy eating it. You can hear their teeth chewing right now, and what they're doing is eating the inner bark of each stick, and then they use the stick to build the dam. I love watching them carry these giant bundles of woody material through the water, and then they kind of use their whole body to just kind of flop it up onto the dam. They use mud that they excavate from the canal to hold these sticks together, so they're kind of building a dam and a canal at the same time. And that high-pitched sound you hear, those are spring peepers, which are a kind of frog that thrive in these wetlands. And because beavers are primarily nocturnal, it's these cameras that allow us to see them at work. The whole family works together. So there's usually 2 adults and then several yearlings or 2 years old. And then sometimes some babies as well, though I haven't seen babies here at Mason Mill, at least not this year. Well, I hope that gives you a little glimpse of the amazing creatures that live here at Mason Mill and helps you see how important the beavers are to this thriving ecosystem. What an amazing array of animals that can be found right here in DeKalb County. This is Ranger Jonah. See you next time. Hey y'all, this is Ranger
Not starting
Jonah,
it
and I'm
again.
standing.
There we go. Every time I watch that, y'all, I just have this big like grin on my face and this feeling of wow, we really have something special in our urban parks. And I just know that in the city of Milton as well, that y'all have these areas just of huge biodiversity, and it's a really big thing to be able to have areas for humans to live, but also these areas for all the other animals to live. I wonder if it would be worth seeing if there's any questions that have popped up in the chat.
Jonah, I have
Yeah,
a couple questions for you that I think are beginning questions, which are beavers related to otters?
great question. They are not closely related to otters. They are rodents, and otters are in the a weasel family, or known as mustelids. So totally different family, but they're small and furry. Here, I'll stop my share while we're talking for a few, and then we'll get back into some of the sciencey stuff.
Yeah. And then are beavers nocturnal?
That's right. They are actually called crepuscular, which is one of those fun science words that you can amaze your family and friends with. Really, just crepuscular means most active at dawn and dusk. Most crepuscular animals are more active at night than in the daytime as well. But otters are considered crepuscular, and beavers are considered crepuscular. But Honestly, I rarely see beavers in the daytime, and I see otters in the daytime all the time. So I would consider beavers crepuscular, edging towards nocturnal.
Mhm. Yeah. And then when they build their burrows on the shore, does it damage the shoreline? Part one. Part two, are they then strategic to pick a location based on bank erosion?
That is a really good question. I have yet to find the beaver's burrow at Mason Mill Park, and y'all, I have looked because this is something I'm very interested in. And I found several possibilities, but my current theory on this is that if I was a beaver, I would choose to dig my burrow where I have control of it. So I would not put my burrow in the side of Burnt Fork Creek or South Fork Peachtree Creek because it's so incised, because there's so much water that flows through it. I would choose to put my burrow on the side of a dam that I built. And because they're underwater entrances, I found a couple possible spots, but have not confirmed that beavers are moving in and out of those. But my current theory is that beavers, because of that erosion issue that you brought up, are going to build their burrows in their own dams because then they have full control over the engineering of them.
If we want to see beavers at Mason Mill, when would be the best time to look?
Well, almost always at the very, very end of the day. So the times I've seen them have been right at that dusk time. Remember the crepuscular hour, and I'm much more of an evening person than a morning person. So I can't tell you I've seen a beaver first thing in the morning because I usually don't arrive at the park at like 5 a.m. But I oftentimes am at the park at I guess in the summertime it's like 7:30 or 8. And that's a good time to possibly see them. The last time I had a personal sighting of the beaver was on a day where it was rainy, and I was just out in the rain. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but it was luck for me.
Then I'm gonna save one for later because you may answer it, and if you don't, we'll answer it at the end.
Cool.
But the last one is, do beavers live anywhere in North America, anywhere other than North America and Europe? If not, what animals live in that niche?
Yeah, okay, so that's a question I don't have an answer to. Now I do know that I got to go on kind of a trip of a lifetime recently to South America, and I was in the Patagonia region of Argentina. And while I was there, as you can imagine, you know how passionate I am about these critters now. People are always sending me articles. And there was an article about how there were some North American beavers that were released into Patagonia and wreaking havoc. Whatever that havoc means, it probably means doing what beavers do, right? Damming a creek and creating a wetland ecosystem. But because North American beavers did not historically live in that environment, they were being called invasive species there. Of course, the beavers were just living their best lives. But I don't know how that ended. But I'm pretty sure that other than that, there have been introduced beavers in other regions. But the truth is that these two species that really they used to be way more extant, so they had a lot more range in Europe and Asia. So I don't really know what's fulfilling the niche there, but my guess is humans. Because we and beavers have a lot in common with how we like to use the environment. We also love being near creeks. We just don't want our toes in the water. But that's so I appreciate the question, and that's something I want to learn a little bit more about. Because in a continent like Australia or Africa, where there are no beavers, yeah, what is the ecosystem like? So not something I've researched yet. Let me jump back into a couple more slides. I'm almost at the end here, and we're almost to 7 o'clock. But I want to talk to you a little bit about this kind of question of beaver and human coexistence. Before we do that, I have one last slide about this idea of how beavers reconnect streams to the floodplains. So you remember with this incised creek, where these incised creeks, the water has a really hard time getting out of the banks of the creek. Every once in a while it does, a couple times a year. For instance, during Hurricane Helene, our creeks crested their banks. But the way a creek should be is in just about every rainstorm, a creek should enter the floodplain. Not a huge amount in the floodplain, but that's why it's called a floodplain. The fact that that they rarely do is an issue. So reconnecting the creek with its floodplain, meaning that the creek can actually use that floodplain with rise and fall of water, is an important thing. So here's what happens when a stream does reconnect with its floodplain. So first of all, you have increased base flow of water. So that's in figure F down there. You have actually more water. But then at the same time, and base flow is like when it hasn't rained in a while, right? But then also when there has been a rain, it decreases the peak flow. So it kind of moderates the amount of water, which you can see can kind of help solve that flooding issue. But it also helps solve that drought issue, because even on a really dry, remember how last year we had like 45 days without rain or something crazy like that? Within a beaver ecosystem, a stream that's connected with its floodplain, even in that drought conditions, the base flow of water would be higher. The ecosystems become more complex. I think I wrote that twice there. Must be, I couldn't have made a mistake. It must just be because ecosystems become more complex. It's so important, right? Well, you be the judge of that. But these complex ecosystems are what create this wide biodiversity. And then also, when the water sits in these wetlands, it replenishes groundwater and also aquifers. And so this is not as much of an issue here in the Southeast, because we're not really dealing with the lack of water as much as they are out west. But there are some people that are saying, if you were to allow more beavers to reconnect the western streams with their floodplains, you would then be replenishing the aquifers and providing more drinking water for the people out west who are dealing with a limited supply of that. And then finally, water quality increases. And the reason for that is with biodiversity, you just have a lot more filtration that's happening. I have not done this before, but I've had people tell me that they would much rather drink a cup of beaver wetland water than a cup of incised creek water. Again, I don't think I'm going to do either of those things, but it's a good thing to remember that it actually also increases water quality. But of course, the issue that we see is, look at how dramatically different the land is from A to F. And as a result of that, what we end up having is human and beaver conflict. Anybody been to Buc-ee's before? Okay. I have, but I don't go there often. Because they don't, the mascot doesn't have the orange teeth, y'all. One of the big issues that we run into with human beaver conflict is flooding. Beavers are just drawn to running water and want to stop running water from flowing. And as a result, creeks that go underneath roads are oftentimes have culverts to allow the creek to go under the road. And when a beaver sees a culvert, they're like, oh, that's a ready-made dam. And they just pile a bunch of sticks and mud across the culvert and then flood the creek across the road. This doesn't happen here in Georgia as much, but up in the Northeast, you hear lots of stories of the transportation department in a place like Vermont having to put millions of dollars into going back to those culverts over and over and over and over and over again to clear out the beaver's dam across the culvert and unflood the road. So as a result, beavers are oftentimes trapped and moved somewhere else or killed. What ends up happening is a habitat that is good for beavers is a habitat beavers are drawn to. And this ends up happening over and over. You trap the beavers, you remove them. New beavers move in. You trap the beavers, you remove them. New beavers move in, because remember how you have the mating pair living in a spot. And then when their yearlings move away, they go in search of another mate and another territory. And so if there's a territory not being used by a family of beavers, those new beavers are going to move in. So there has been a movement to create something that levels the pond. but also tricks the beavers, because beavers, if they hear running water, they're going to try to plug it. And so this is called a beaver deceiver. It has a very catchy name. And what it is, there's a wire cage around an inflow pipe on the left-hand side there. The pipe runs through the beaver's dam, and then the water flows out of the dam downstream. Beavers, they don't really care about what's going on downstream. They're wanting the upstream part for themselves. So they don't dam the outflow. But that wire cage and the fact that the inflow pipe is underwater means that the beavers don't block that pipe. And what it means is that you can control how high the beaver's wetland gets. You can allow them their wetland, but not allow that wetland to overflow onto your roads or onto your farms or onto your golf courses or whatever. And so this is an example of what a beaver deceiver looks like. You might call it a pond leveler. I think beaver deceiver is actually a brand name these days. But you can see the outflow pipe here, and you can also see that cage in the background. And that's how a beaver deceiver works. And so it's an idea of let's let the beavers do their beaver thing and stop spinning our wheels trying to move them and get rid of them, but instead just be like, they're doing their thing, but let's make there be a level of water that we can handle for the area that we're in. Of course, the other problem is beavers come out of the wetlands and they chew down trees. And there's really just one solution for that. Either you let the beavers do their thing and they're going to transform what trees grow on your property or in the park, and then transform that area into a grouping of trees that can be cut down, or you can protect your trees. And it's called tree wrapping. You don't even have to do it out as far as this one. I've wrapped trees right up against the tree. This gives them a little room to grow. But tree wrapping takes some work. But if you're committed to this amazing ecosystem that the beavers create, and if you're committed to human-beaver coexistence, then you can add a pond leveler and tree wrapping, and the beavers will not chew these trees down. Then the final thing is not really a way we stop beavers from doing their thing, but rather help beavers. This is a new thing called a BDA, Beaver Dam Analog. And there's been people across the United States that have started putting these pylons into their creeks, and then humans weaving willow boughs between the pylons to create something that's kind of like a beaver dam. With our super incised creeks where the water comes down so fast, the beavers can't actually build a dam that's strong enough to hold in the water and create the habitat that they want. So there's a lot of creeks that beavers just can't live in. So humans have started putting in BDAs to try to mimic the reconnection with the floodplain that beavers create for their creeks as a way of doing stream restoration. And this is a fairly new idea, but something I'm super interested in, how we can learn from nature. And instead of like bringing in a bobcat with a bunch of giant stones to try to support these super incised creek banks that are falling down, what if we just embrace the idea that a creek is supposed to be connected with its floodplain and then help the beavers along? Here's a little graphic of how a BDA works. I'm super interested in the idea of possibly installing something like that at Mason Mill Park. Have not gotten there yet, but it's definitely something I'm interested in. All right, y'all. You've been listening to me talk beavers for just about an hour now. I'm ready to talk with you all a little bit more, but I have a question for you first. Are you a beaver believer? I'll be interested to know. I want you to know there's a lot of beaver resources out there, but I'm going to point you to 3. These 2 books are fantastic. Eager by Ben Goldfarb and Beaverland by Lila Phillip are really great books. Ben Goldfarb is definitely a beaver believer. And if you're wanting a presentation if you're wanting to learn more about along the lines of what I've presented today, a little bit more about the beavers and their ecological niche, then I recommend Eager. Beaverland is a little bit more about how beavers and humans interact. So it has a little bit more of like talking with modern beaver trappers and people who are do not like beavers, or farmers that really do like beavers. But both books are really great. And then the Beaver Institute is an organization that's really trying to bring beavers from being something that people just say is, oh, that's weird, to something, to a creature that is revered for its keystone qualities and also for what it can do to really change our creeks and the habitats around them. And I'd love you to keep in touch with me. Here's my email address. Go ahead and write it down. Shoot me emails. I mean, I love learning about beavers. So, if you have one in your backyard or whatever, send me a picture. Come to a program with me at Mason Mill Park. Go to Eventbrite and search for Mason Mill Park, and you'll find tons of nature programs. Or you can follow me on social media. These are my personal socials and also my official park ranger socials. And you can just search for my name. But you see most of my handles are like Mason Mill or Hiking Atlanta, something like that. So I hope you keep in touch, and thanks for sticking with me through my amazing slog through all things beaver. Appreciate you having me, Jen. Let's chat a little bit.
Yeah, Jonah.
I'll stop the sharing in a second, and then we'll get on screen.
Yeah, if you want to pull up the Q&A, I think there's some really great questions there for
Cool.
you,
I'll just-
which might also encourage other questions. And it looks like in the chat, you've got some beaver believers. You may have changed some hearts and minds.
Oh, I see a couple people said they've read Eager before. Ben Goldfarb, by the way, he totally became a beaver believer while writing the book. And, as a journalist, you're supposed to be like, just have your nonpartisan hat on, but you could tell by the end of the book Eager, he's as into it as I am. Okay. Cool. So yeah, a couple questions here. We'll start with this one from Katie. Did you encounter any capybara in your travels? No, I haven't. I am super interested in capybaras. One of the facts that I did not give in my presentation is that beavers are the second largest rodent in the world. Capybaras are the largest rodent in the world, and I just don't know a ton about them. I've really done a deep dive into everything related to metro Atlanta ecosystems, and I'm just still learning about places far away. The thing I've recently have learned is that you can do capybara yoga at some place in North Georgia and snuggle capybaras and do a yoga routine with a capybara on your back or something like that. So I don't know. Google that. I just saw it on social media, but I wish I knew more about capybaras to tell you about, but it's not something I know a ton about. I am super intrigued also by nutria, which are another aquatic rodent that have not been found in DeKalb County as far as I'm aware, but are oftentimes seen as pests or invasive species. The other aquatic rodent that we do have is muskrats, and you saw in that video I played that muskrats are smaller than beavers, but oftentimes live in very similar environments, but they're not the engineers that beavers are. They're more like tag-alongs. Okay, Victoria says, beavers were located on one local small DeKalb lake, but the dam was breached during Storm Helene, and the beavers left. Could those beavers return with some help from folks who know how to build beaver analogs? Ooh, I love this idea. I can tell you that there was an attempt to do that at the Blue Heron Nature Preserve, which is in Buckhead. Blue Heron Nature Preserve did have a colony of beavers living there, and also a large storm happened and their dams washed away and the beavers left. When people say the beavers left, I have a fear that the beavers didn't leave, but the beavers got run over by cars. And that's a sad thing to think, but it's possible because so many of their habitats are surrounded by these roads. So it may be worse than that, right? Um, but at the Blue Heron Nature Preserve, the beavers had left or whatever, and a group of scientists, and there's a group called the Southeastern Beaver Working Group that is working to help elevate the profile of beavers in the metro area. Some of the local scientists who are beaver believers were able to get a grant to install BDAs on this small creek that runs through Blue Heron Nature Preserve. But without beavers and without humans actively maintaining the BDAs have degraded a whole bunch and aren't really doing their work. The other thing that happened is when the BDAs were put in, it changed the course of the creek. And y'all saw from my little diagrams there, right? Like that is what happens. These creeks are going to change. And that was also a problem for some neighbors. They were like, wait, the creek's closer to my house than it used to be. Well, that's because you put in BDAs. But here's the cool thing is there are beavers that have moved back in to Blue Heron Nature Preserve. And so how do we entice them to return is my big question, as opposed to, I don't think there's, I had somebody reach out to me the other day and say, hey, can I just trap some beavers and then put them in a place? And there's got to be rules around that. I may be a government official, but I don't know what those rules are. And so I wouldn't be going and putting wild animals into new habitats. We can like, that would need to go to the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, I'm sure. But I do think putting in beaver dam analogs might be like a little carrot to get the beavers to come. What are the early signs you have beavers? Okay, so beavers have been at Mason Mill since I've been there. So they probably are like, what's the early signs that Ranger Jonah is at Mason Mill Park? But I'll tell you the signs that you almost always see first is you're going to see dropped in the creek or in the lake, you're going to find a branch that has been denuded of its bark. So there's no more bark on the tree branch. And instead, when you look at that, it almost looks like tiny little scratches all over this like bare branch. And those scratches are of course from these beavers' teeth. They kind of eat the sticks like corn on the cob. And that's the thing I would look for. You can also tell if there is new beaver chews on trees, but beavers are going to start with smaller trees. They don't really want to start with the big trees because what they're trying to do is get food. And so instead of looking at the biggest trees on the property, look at the smaller trees and try to find ones. They almost look like they've been snipped with like a pair of scissors. So a small tree, it's kind of amazing that these teeth, let's see if we can, I've got a little skull here with the uppers and the bottom. It's just like these teeth just like snip them. And I don't have a branch with me right now, but it's a very sharp angle that you'll see those snips. I think that answers that question there too. And I mean, I'm happy to just end it here, but y'all, I could talk beavers all night. So tell me if there's any other questions. Otherwise, if you have questions, or we can just wrap up.
Jonah, I think it was a super robust presentation, and in the chat, wonderful presentation, great program. This is fabulous. So I think along the way, I had my own questions of which you answered. Mainly about how do you reintroduce the concept of beavers if you lack beavers, right? And I think that can be important to creating and preserving our wetlands, especially because amphibians are dying off, and to preserve their habitats, I think that's an important piece that you slightly touched on, but absolutely critical. They are the thing in nature that is preserving these amphibians as we are declining them, sadly, by habitat loss, right?
That's right. If you listen for frogs, and this is a plug for your next webinar, but if you listen for frogs and you hear the spring peepers or the green tree frogs or the leopard frogs or the bullfrogs, where are you going to hear them for the most part? You're going to hear them at your stormwater retention ponds near your subdivision, right? Because that's all the ecosystem left for them. Because what those stormwater retention ponds, you know what I'm talking about? Like there's like
Yeah.
big concrete like boxes that when the water flows off of the roads, it's supposed to flow into those retention ponds, hold that water, and then let it slowly seep out into the creek. It's a great idea, but what it really is a beaver wetland, right? And as a result, if you walk by one of those retention ponds after a rain, you're going to hear all the frogs. But we don't have any other spaces for that. And so, what if there was a natural way that we could take the areas where humans aren't living and turn it into that vibrant ecosystem? Um, the woman who wrote, Lila Phillips, who wrote Beaverland, oftentimes she talks about Beaverland being this aquatic paradise that North America was. And we now think of so much of our land as dry, but like it was sloppy wet for much of natural history and human history because these creeks were just constantly like overflowing their banks and there was all of this habitat. So yeah, I really think that this could be a solution that's not human driven with our like hubris, but instead saying like, hey, this problem has already been solved. We just need to make space for it to be able to be solved again by nature. And I think I first got into beavers partially because I moved into Mason Mill Park as an office space, and I found that like, oh, this is the creature that's creating all of this fantastic educational content that I can produce for the community. So it was partially that, but then I started realizing, you know what, my two favorite animals growing up were box turtles and manatees. And if you think about those animals, they're kind of like slow and plodding. They're a little weird, kind of gross. They're definitely underestimated. And that's really what beavers are too, right? Like slow and plodding and a little weird and kind of gross, but highly underestimated. So, it really like suits me and what I really believe about the world is I always like trying to find the hidden or secret things. And people just don't realize that there's a rodent which makes more biodiversity than pretty much anything else in this Piedmont region.
And I think one of your Mason Mill regulars asked if you put the videos from the night cameras somewhere.
Yeah, so if y'all want to watch more of the videos from those wildlife cameras, I post compilations on YouTube. And so you can go to the Ranger Jonah McDonald YouTube channel and you'll find compilations of those videos. I don't currently have just like a Dropbox of all the videos that you can just like sift through, but it's not a bad idea just making that public and viewable. What I find is there's so much content from those wildlife cameras that you want to narrow it down because if you're flipping through 200 wildlife videos from a month, you're gonna be like squirrel, 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 squirrel. Oh my gosh, there's a bobcat. Squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. So it's nice to have a little bit of editing to it.
That's great. Brian posted in the chat that that's my program request, turtles. So I think we might get Jonah on as a spectator to talk about
I would definitely want to
turtles.
learn more about turtles because when I was a kid, I was super into it, but I know some turtle facts. I've even picked up a common snapping turtle. But I promise you it was only one that was about this big. I didn't have the guts to pick up the really big one. Yeah, turtles are so prehistoric and interesting, and there's so many different kinds of them. And there's another great science word related to turtles, which is brumation. That's another word you can amaze your families and friends with. Reptiles and brumate, they don't hibernate, but it's the reptile form of hibernation. So you can say, yes, that turtle was brumating all winter. Well, I really appreciate y'all having me. It's fun to get to talk about this topic. I hope it inspired y'all to learn more about nature and to protect nature. And more than anything, hopefully you have a whole bunch of weird beaver facts. And now it's the very end of the webinar, and I get to tell you the grossest beaver fact. So you're warned. Log out if you don't want to hear it. Beavers practice coprophagia. And that's another good science word, but it really means they eat their poop. Okay, yes, they do. I told you it was the grossest beaver fact, but they're not the only animal that does this. Rabbits do this too, but I want to give you the context for it. So if you're a creature that eats a lot of woody material with just a whole bunch of fiber in it, you need to have either a crazy robust stomach or you need to have multiple stomachs. So think about a cow, right? They have a stomach, they eat the woody material and then they regurgitate it back up into their mouth. They chew it a little bit more. That's chewing their cud, right? And then they swallow it back down so it can be digested further. So the digestion process has to have lots of different steps. So what if you're an animal that doesn't have multiple stomachs or doesn't regurgitate your food and chew it, masticate it again in your mouth? Well, what beavers do and what rabbits do as well is they regurgitate, or they don't regurgitate, they pass all that woody material through their gut. They deposit it as scat or as poop, and then they pick it back up, eat it a second time, and then pass it through their gut once more. And when it comes out that second time, their feces are so fine, it's almost like sawdust or powder, because they've gotten every bit of nutrients out of it that they can. So it's highly efficient and also highly gross. And beavers almost always do their pooping in the water. So it's very, very rare to find beaver scat, because if you're pooping out, well, if you poop it out on the ground, then you eat it again. And then when you poop it out the second time, you poop it in the water, you're not going to find sawdust floating in the water. But they do use their castoreum gland to put scent all around the area. So you'll oftentimes find these mud piles that beavers have made and then deposited castoreum on top of it as a way of like proving that it's their territory. And I am super interested, Brian. I love that you asked this question. So they recognize the difference in the two types they produce. I have no idea. I've been wanting to know that for a while. My theory is that they can feel it, but I don't really know. Gosh, if we could only ask a beaver. So now
I like
you've
the
got,
cabbage. I like the cabbage video way better than the story of what they just ate. That reduced my stress. I think my stress just went up a little bit with this one.
you know, that cabbage beaver video, I think the title of it is like watching this for an hour can reduce your stress more than going, on
Yep.
whatever. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's funny how they can be so cute and yet so gross at the same time.
Children.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have to say, for me, this was such a special treat, and I'm sure it was for everybody else. But Jonah, thank you for joining us on Wildlife 101. And also for those of you that want to share this or rewatch it later, share it with your loved ones, share it on any platforms that you have. I know we got a couple questions about it in the Q&A. You can go to miltonga.gov /wildlife 101. You're welcome to share any of those videos. They're attached to our YouTube account, so it's pretty easy to share. And thank you for joining us. And next month, we hope to see some of you for, if not all of you, for our lesson on frogs. And we're going to listen in and we're going to see what we can identify.
That's
So
so
thank you
exciting.
guys so much.
I'll practice my frog calls. See y'all. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonah.